I still remember the sound of his voice that day. Flat, cold, like the son I raised, had been replaced by a stranger. He said, "Mom, it's better if we don't talk for a while." And just like that, 12 years of silence began. I stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone as if it might bring him back, but all it held was emptiness. My daughter-in-law had finally succeeded. She'd turned my only child against me. That was the day I stopped begging to be loved. That was the day I decided to build a life so strong their cruelty could never touch me again. My name is Ruth Harris, and this is my story. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? I always love knowing who's out there listening. Maybe you'll understand what I went through. Maybe you've been there yourself. Cut off, dismissed, forgotten by the very people you'd give your life for. I was 46 when my son, Adam, married her, Melissa. She was everything a mother tries to welcome for her child: polished, polite, all bright smiles and careful manners. The first time Adam brought her over for dinner, she complimented everything: my cooking, my home, even the old lace curtains I'd sewn years ago. But beneath those smiles, there was a sharpness. I saw it in the way she watched me, like she was studying what made me matter to my son. Still, I wanted to believe it was just my imagination. Adam was happy, and that's all I wanted. After their wedding, things changed quickly. Suddenly, they were too busy to visit. Then calls went unanswered, and when I finally showed up one afternoon with a casserole, the kind Adam always loved, Melissa opened the door but didn't invite me in. "Oh, Ruth, we're actually heading out. Sorry," she said with that plastic smile. "You should call before coming by." Adam stood behind her, eyes down, hands in his pockets. He didn't even look at me. I drove home in silence that day, the casserole still warm on the seat beside me. I left it on my porch and let the night eat it. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. At Christmas, I'd mail gifts. They always came back marked "Return to Sender." Birthdays passed without a word. Friends would ask about Adam, and I'd smile politely, pretending he was just busy with life. But behind closed doors, I'd sit by the window and whisper his name, wondering if he ever thought of me. Then one evening, I got a call from an old friend who still lived near them. She said she'd run into Melissa at a store, that Melissa had called me obsessive, that she'd told people I was toxic, controlling, unwilling to let go of my grown son. It felt like someone had poured cold water over my heart. Me? Controlling? The woman who'd worked 2 jobs to put him through college? Who'd stayed up nights sewing his prom tux because we couldn't afford to rent one? But I didn't defend myself. Not anymore. Because that's when I realized my son didn't just drift away. He'd been steered away. I remember the last call we ever had. It was my birthday. I hadn't heard from him in months, so I called. When he answered, his voice was stiff, cautious. "Adam," I said softly, "it's me. I just wanted to hear your voice." He sighed. "Mom, I can't keep doing this. Melissa says it's not healthy. You make everything about guilt." "Guilt?" I repeated, my throat tightening. "I just love you. Is that such a crime?" He didn't answer right away. Then, in a tone that shattered me, he said, "Maybe it's better if we don't talk for a while." The line went silent. Just like that. A son was gone. I stared at the wall, my birthday cake untouched on the table. The candles flickered for a moment, then went out on their own. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat there motionless while the air grew still around me. Something inside me hardened. Not bitterness, but resolve. If they wanted to erase me, I'd give them a reason to remember my name. I walked into my tiny kitchen, took out my old recipe book, the one filled with stains and pencil notes, and started writing down new ideas, not for comfort, for survival. I'd been running a small catering service on and off for years, mostly for neighbors and church events. But that night, I decided it wouldn't just be a side thing anymore. It would be my lifeline, my future, my proof that I could rise, even when left to rot. As dawn broke, I looked at the first rays of sunlight brushing my window. "Ruth," I whispered to myself, "they took your heart, but not your hands." And so I began. Little did I know, the same determination that started with heartbreak would one day build the mansion they'd come crawling back to. People say time heals all wounds, but whoever said that never spent 12 birthdays without hearing their child's voice. Time doesn't heal. It hardens. It shapes. It teaches you how to build a new kind of strength out of what's left of your brokenness. And that's exactly what I did. In those early years after Adam cut me off, silence filled every corner of my home. The old house creaked like it was mourning with me. His childhood photos still lined the hallway. His graduation picture, his first day of school, the crooked smile he gave me when he lost his first tooth. Sometimes I'd dust those frames just to feel close to him again. Other times, I couldn't bear to look. So, I turned my focus to something that didn't break my heart. My work. I'd always been known around town for my pies, peach, pecan, and a lemon meringue that people swore could fix any bad mood. One morning, while staring at my bills, I told myself, if no one's going to take care of you, Ruth, then you'll take care of yourself. I took the last of my savings, $3,200, and bought a used oven from a closing bakery. My kitchen became my battlefield, the scent of butter and sugar my armor. At first, I baked for neighbors and church groups. Orders trickled in slowly. A dozen cupcakes here, a pie there. But I showed up. Rain or shine, I delivered every order with a smile that I forced until it became real again. Word spread. Soon I was catering small gatherings. Birthdays, baptisms, and even one wedding where I fought back tears the whole time, pretending the sight of a mother dancing with her son didn't break me. But the truth, each job healed me just a little bit more. I poured my heart into everything I baked. People could taste the emotion, the history, the fight inside those recipes, and slowly the business began to bloom. About 2 years in, I met someone who changed everything. Her name was Patricia, the owner of a small local bookstore. She ordered from me often, muffins for her customers, pies for her family. One day she said, "Ruth, have you ever thought about catering for corporate events? My husband works in the mayor's office. They're always looking for local vendors." My heart skipped. I'd never dared to dream that big. Patricia smiled knowingly. "You're talented. Stop hiding behind that kitchen door. Let people see what you can do." So I did. I prepared a full sample spread, mini quiches, lemon bars, pecan bites, and sandwiches so delicate they looked like artwork. I delivered it myself to City Hall, trembling as I carried the trays. 3 days later, the phone rang. It was the event coordinator. "Mrs. Harris, everyone loved your food. We'd like to hire you for next month's civic banquet." I sank into my chair and cried, not from sadness this time, but from validation. That one event led to another, and then another. By year 4, I was catering full-time. I rented a small commercial kitchen downtown, hired 2 assistants, and registered my business as Ruth's Table. The name made people smile. It wasn't just about food, it was about community, about gathering again, even when life tried to scatter everything apart. I'd wake up at 4:30 every morning, start the ovens, and play old Motown records while I cooked. It made the loneliness lighter somehow, like the songs were keeping me company. One day, a young man came in to pick up an order. He was new in town, kind, polite, probably around Adam's age. He said, "My mom passed away last year. I've been looking for a place that feels home-cooked, you know?" I smiled softly. "Then you came to the right place." He became a regular, not just for the food, but for the warmth. And that's when I realized something important. I might have lost one kind of family, but I was quietly building another through kindness and care. 5 years passed. My catering business wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Local. Newspapers ran stories calling me the Pie Queen of Pine Ridge. My picture hung in city offices, my recipes featured on TV segments. I'd walk into my kitchen, smell the butter melting, and whisper, "You did it, Ruth. You made something out of nothing." Still, no success could fill the space Adam left behind. Sometimes I'd catch myself watching the door, half expecting him to walk in, laugh, and say it was all a mistake. But that moment never came. Then one rainy afternoon, while packing up from an event, I overheard two women chatting near the buffet table. "Did you hear about Adam and Melissa Carter? Lost their business, poor things. Had to sell their house." My heart stopped. I hadn't heard those names in over a decade. I turned, pretending to rearrange napkins, listening carefully. "They're staying in a rental now," one woman added. "I think they had to pull their kids from private school." I didn't say a word, but as I drove home through the rain, my mind spun. I wanted to feel pity, but instead something deeper stirred. Not anger, not revenge, just a quiet recognition of how life eventually balances its scales. By then I'd bought my first property, a modest building downtown for my bakery, but something in me whispered that it was only the beginning. The storm that once destroyed me had, somehow, made me unstoppable. And I didn't know it yet, but the success that rose from my pain was about to build a mansion that would bring my past right to my doorstep. When you spend enough years rebuilding from nothing, success doesn't arrive with fireworks. It creeps in quietly like dawn light through old curtains. I didn't wake up one day rich. It happened one order, one sleepless night, one small victory at a time. And then suddenly, there I was, standing at the gates of a mansion. My mansion. By the time I turned 58, Ruth's Table had become one of the most sought-after catering companies in the region. We handled everything from political galas to private weddings. I'd gone from baking pies in my kitchen to managing a full staff of 12, running 3 delivery vans, and turning down clients because we were booked months in advance. People called me Mrs. Harris now, with respect in their voices. I used to walk past the grand White House on Maple Hill for years. It sat there, perched above the town like a quiet dream. Wraparound porch, tall oak doors, sunlight spilling through its wide windows. I'd always slow down when I drove by, thinking, someone lucky must live there. When the for sale sign went up, I almost laughed. It was so far beyond anything I'd ever imagined owning. But curiosity made me call the realtor. 2 weeks later, I stood in that marble-floored entryway, and something inside me said, "You've earned this." The first night I spent there, I didn't unpack. I just walked barefoot through the echoing halls, touching the carved banisters and tracing my fingers along the windowsills. The air smelled faintly of cedar and possibility. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of the woman I'd lost. The girl who'd once cried herself to sleep over a broken heart now stood surrounded by chandeliers and silence, the kind that comes from peace, not loneliness. I hung no pictures yet. The house didn't need them. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was the picture. Neighbors started visiting, bringing pies and congratulations. They told me the mansion had a history, that it once belonged to a wealthy family who lost everything. Funny, I thought. How life repeats itself. One family falls, another rises, both learning that love and greed can't live under the same roof. A week later, a local newspaper ran a feature titled, "From Heartbreak to Success, Ruth Harris and the Taste of Resilience." They photographed me on the front steps holding a tray of lemon bars. My smile was steady, calm. When the story went live, I received dozens of messages. Old friends, former clients, even strangers who said my story inspired them. But one message stood out. It wasn't an email or a letter. It was a sound. A knock at my door. It was early evening. The sky tinted gold. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door, and there he was. Adam. My breath caught. For a moment, time folded in on itself. My little boy, who used to cling to my skirt, stood before me, now a man with lines around his eyes and a heaviness in his posture. Beside him stood Melissa, still polished, still wearing that same thin smile that had haunted my dreams. And just behind them, 2 young faces peeked out. A boy around 10, a girl maybe 8, my grandchildren, the ones I'd never met. "Mom," Adam said softly, "can we come in?" I froze. My mind raced through 1,000 memories. Every unanswered call, every returned package, every lonely Christmas. But then, against all logic, I opened the door. They stepped inside slowly, eyes darting around at the high ceilings and the sweeping staircase. Melissa's expression flickered from polite admiration to envy, so fast I almost missed it. "This is stunning," she said, her voice syrupy. "You've really done well for yourself." "I have," I said quietly. "It's been a long road." She laughed a little too brightly. "Well, I always said you had potential." No, she hadn't. But I didn't correct her. Adam looked at me with a hesitant smile. "It's been a long time, Mom. The kids wanted to meet their grandmother." My eyes softened. I knelt slightly, smiling at the children. "Hello, sweethearts. I'm very happy to finally see you." They smiled shyly, and for a second I felt my heart crack open just enough to let love in again. We sat in the living room, the one with cream-colored furniture and sunlight spilling through the tall windows. The air was filled with small talk, too careful, too clean. Melissa complimented the decor. Adam talked about his work, transitions, and the children played quietly on the rug. But beneath every word floated something unspoken. When Adam mentioned they'd been looking for a new place, I noticed the flicker of calculation in Melissa's eyes as she scanned the room. Her tone changed, softer, rehearsed. "This house must feel empty sometimes, Ruth," she said. "You must get lonely here all by yourself." I smiled, sipping my tea. "Not really, it's peaceful." She leaned back, tilting her head. "Still, it's a lot of space for one person. I was telling Adam it'd make perfect sense if we moved in for a bit. Help you around, keep you company." The cup nearly slipped from my hand. My eyes darted to Adam, who looked down, ashamed. I told her it was too much to ask, he mumbled. Melissa waved him off. "Don't be silly, it's family, and it's not like we have anywhere else to go right now." The room went quiet except for the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock. I felt my heartbeat steady, slow and deliberate. In that moment, I realized something. They hadn't come for reconciliation. They'd come for rescue. I smiled politely and said, "Why don't we talk about that tomorrow? I'm sure you're tired from the drive." Melissa grinned, confident she'd won. "Of course. We'll stay the night then." As I led them to the guest rooms, I could almost hear the echo of my younger self. The one who once stood outside their door, turned away. Only this time, I wasn't the one being shut out. That night, lying in my king-sized bed, I stared at the ceiling. After 12 years of silence, they were under my roof again. Not because of love, but because of need. And yet something inside me wasn't angry. It was clear, sharp, and calm. "They came to take," I whispered into the dark, "but I'll decide what they leave with." The next morning, I woke to the faint sound of laughter downstairs, unfamiliar, almost ghostly after so many years of silence. For a second, I thought it was a dream, that maybe time had folded back on itself and my son was a boy again, laughing in my kitchen. But when I walked down the stairs, I found Melissa at my stove, wearing one of my aprons. "Morning, Ruth," she said brightly, flipping pancakes like she owned the place. "I thought I'd help out. You probably don't cook this early anymore." The comment landed like a small knife disguised as kindness. Adam sat at the table, sipping coffee, pretending not to notice the tension. The children ate quietly, their eyes darting between us, sensing the undercurrent. I smiled softly. "I still cook every day, actually. Old habits die hard." She gave a sugary laugh. "Oh, that's nice. I just figured since you're retired now, you'd have help." "Retired?" I repeated, tilting my head. "Melissa, my business runs 6 days a week. I just bought the bakery next door to expand production." Her laughter faltered for a split second before she masked it with another smile. "Oh, I didn't realize." No, she hadn't realized anything. Not who I'd become, not what I'd built, and certainly not what kind of woman she was dealing with now. Over breakfast, Adam finally said it. "Mom, I know this is sudden, but we've hit a rough patch." I stayed silent, letting him continue. He sighed. "We lost the business last year. The restaurant went under after some bad investments. We had to sell the house, the cars, everything." I nodded, my face neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that." He hesitated. "Melissa thought maybe we could stay here for a bit, just until we get back on our feet." Melissa jumped in, her tone dripping with false humility. "Of course, we'd pay you back. It's just temporary." I set my teacup down slowly, feeling the weight of 12 years press into that moment. The last time I'd asked to visit them, I'd been told I was too much trouble. Now they stood in my kitchen asking for shelter. Karma didn't need my help. It had perfect timing. I took a slow breath and smiled. "You're welcome to stay for a little while." Melissa's grin widened like a cat who'd just found cream. "Thank you, Ruth. We'll make it up to you, I promise." Adam looked relieved, and the kids seemed genuinely happy. That alone softened me. Whatever my feelings toward their parents, those children didn't deserve the bitterness that came before them. Still, deep inside, I whispered a warning to myself. Don't mistake politeness for forgiveness. The first week was quiet. Melissa busied herself rearranging my living room to make it feel more modern. She moved my grandmother's rocking chair into the hallway, boxed up old photo frames, and replaced my lace curtains with plain beige ones from a discount store. "Your style is nostalgic," she'd said, smiling. "But let's freshen things up a bit. You'll thank me later." I didn't argue. I just watched her, silently cataloging every move. Because this wasn't about decor. It was about dominance. Adam spent most of his time in the study, sending out job applications. I'd find him late at night, sitting with his head in his hands. He'd look up and say, "You've done well for yourself, Mom. I'm proud of you." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the shadow of Melissa's influence still hung heavy. One evening, I overheard voices drifting from the kitchen. Sharp, hushed, but unmistakable. "Do you realize how much this place is worth?" Melissa's voice hissed. Adam sighed. "It's Mom's house, not ours." "Not yet," she whispered. "She's old, Adam. She doesn't need all this space. We could help her downsize, convince her to sign. Something—" "Melissa, stop. No, you stop," she snapped. "Do you want your kids living in a rental forever? This could be our chance to get back everything we lost." My blood ran cold. I stayed still behind the doorway, heart pounding but face calm. I'd spent years learning how to hold my silence when the world underestimated me. That silence had become my sharpest weapon. Later that night, I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the wide yard below. The same moonlight that once comforted me now burned with purpose. I thought about everything they'd taken, my peace, my son, my years of joy. And now they wanted the roof over my head too, but this time I wasn't the same Ruth they'd discarded. I whispered to my reflection in the glass, "You can't betray someone who's already set herself free." The next morning, I made a decision. If they wanted to live under my roof, then they'd live by my rules. And more importantly, they'd see every single day that the woman they once pitied had become untouchable. So I smiled over breakfast and said, "I'm hosting a dinner this Saturday. Some old friends from town, business associates, a few investors. I want you all there." Melissa's eyes lit up. "Oh, perfect. We'll help plan it." "Good," I said softly. "It's time everyone saw what family looks like again." But deep down, I knew. It wouldn't be a dinner for reunion. It would be a stage for revelation. That night, before bed, I opened an old box from my desk drawer. Letters I'd written to Adam over the years, never mailed. One by one, I read them aloud, then set them in the fireplace. The pages curled into ash, and I whispered, "This time, I won't burn for their mistakes." By the end of that first week, my once quiet home had become a stage. Laughter that didn't reach the eyes, clinking dishes that masked resentment, and polite smiles stretched thin as glass. They were under my roof again, but this time I wasn't the same woman who once stood crying on the porch, begging for a place in their lives. No, now they were the guests, and I was the woman who owned the house. At first, things seemed almost normal. The illusion of a family rediscovering each other. Melissa baked cookies with the kids, played music in the mornings, and called me Mom, as though 12 years hadn't passed without a single call or letter. She made sure to say it loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, as if to prove her goodness. But when the neighbors weren't watching, her tone changed. The same woman who had smiled sweetly at me in public would tilt her head and say things like, "You really should let me handle these things, Ruth. You get overwhelmed easily." Or, "I told Adam we should update your wardrobe. Something younger might make you feel relevant." I'd simply nod, smile politely, and carry on, because I'd learned something over the years. When you stay silent, people mistake it for weakness. But silence is just power, biding its time. Melissa's attempts at control grew bolder. She began redecorating entire rooms without asking, ordering furniture online and charging it to my account. When I questioned her, she'd laugh and say, "Oh, I thought you wouldn't mind. You said yourself the place could use a little life." Adam, as always, avoided conflict. He'd stand by, uneasy, torn between us. Once I caught him alone in the garden, staring at the roses I'd planted years ago. "They're still beautiful," he murmured. I smiled. Roses don't forget how to bloom, even after being neglected. He looked up then, and I saw guilt in his eyes, deep, worn, and real. But guilt isn't the same as change. Despite the tension, the children were a light in that house. They followed me into the kitchen, asking questions, giggling as I let them knead dough or dust sugar over cookies. They'd say, "Grandma Ruth, can you tell us one of your stories?" And I'd smile, realizing they had no idea their parents had stolen 12 years of those stories from me. One afternoon, while we baked, the little girl, Lily, looked up at me and asked, "Did Daddy live here when he was little?" My heart clenched. "Yes, sweetheart, he did." She smiled. "Then this house is ours too." I froze. Melissa was standing in the doorway watching us, her arms crossed and a smirk curling her lips. "Exactly," she said softly. "Our home." That night, I sat in my study, staring at old paperwork, deeds, contracts, bank statements, and that's when the truth hit me with quiet satisfaction. This house wasn't just a home. It was one of 6 properties I now owned outright. 3 were rentals. One was the storefront for Ruth's table. One was a lakeside cottage. And this one, the mansion on the hill, had been purchased in full. No mortgage, no loans. But the most poetic part? Their old restaurant, the one they'd lost in bankruptcy, was in a building I owned through my holding company. The landlord who'd served them their final eviction notice had been me. I leaned back in my chair, an unexpected laugh bubbling up. Life truly had a sense of irony. In the days that followed, I decided to give Melissa exactly what she wanted: rope. She kept pushing boundaries, thinking she was gaining control when in truth she was stepping right into the story I was writing. I let her throw little gatherings in her new living room. I let her brag to my neighbors about managing the estate. I even smiled when she told one woman that she'd helped poor Ruth keep things organized. Because sometimes the best revenge is letting someone believe they've won, right before they realize you were holding the crown all along. A week later, I invited them all to dinner. I said it casually, while Melissa sipped her wine. "I thought it would be nice to host something formal," I said. "A celebration of family." Her eyes sparkled. "Oh, what a wonderful idea. I'll handle the guest list." "Already done," I replied. "Just a few business partners and local friends. They've been wanting to meet my family." I watched her face carefully. She didn't notice the emphasis on my. That evening, after they went to bed, I walked through the house in the quiet. The same halls that once echoed with loneliness now hummed with a different kind of energy. Calm, deliberate, powerful. On the dining table sat the engraved invitations I'd sent earlier that day, each one sealed with gold foil, elegant and simple, and one line printed beneath my name read, "A dinner in gratitude, for the blessings that come after betrayal." I smiled as I read it aloud. Melissa wanted to play house? Then she'd get to see what happens when the real homeowner decides to host the game. Before going to bed, I stood by the window and whispered to the night, "They think they're settling in, but by this time next week, they'll be packing." And somewhere deep in my chest, for the first time in years, I felt not pain, but power. The kind that only comes from surviving every fire they meant to burn you with. The house shimmered that evening, candles flickering across crystal, laughter rising like false music. I stood at the head of the long dining table watching them all, business partners, friends, and the family that once erased me. Melissa glided between guests like a queen, her voice sugary sweet. "We're just so proud of Mom," she said, her hand brushing my shoulder as if she owned it. "Now that Adam and I are here, we'll help her manage everything." The table went still for a moment. I smiled softly and lifted my glass. "That's kind of you, Melissa, though, as you may not know, I've managed quite well." Patricia, an old friend, leaned forward. "You've expanded into real estate, haven't you, Ruth?" "Yes," I replied. "In fact, my company owns several properties in town." I turned to Melissa, who was already smirking. "One of them might sound familiar. Your old restaurant." Her face blanched. What?" I kept my tone calm, almost tender. "When it went under, I bought the building. I was your landlord, Melissa, the one who evicted you." The silence that followed was thick and alive. Adam froze, fork mid-air. Melissa's painted smile cracked. "I didn't do it for revenge," I continued. "I did it because every ending deserves new ownership." The guests exchanged glances. Admiration, surprise, maybe respect. I raised my glass once more. To new beginnings, and to finally telling the truth at this table. Melissa stared down, trembling. Adam's eyes filled with regret. And I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I didn't need their apology. I had my piece, served warm, right alongside dessert. When the last car disappeared down the hill, silence wrapped around the house like a blanket. No more tense smiles, no more pretending. Just peace, pure, earned peace. The next morning, the air felt different, lighter. Melissa's perfume no longer lingered in the hallways. Her laughter, sharp and hollow, had vanished. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of birds outside remained. Adam stayed behind a few minutes longer. His eyes were red, his shoulders slumped with the weight of 12 lost years. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I placed a hand over his. "You don't have to deserve it. You just have to mean it." He nodded, tears slipping down. "I believed her lies. I thought you didn't want me." "I always wanted you," I whispered. "I just stopped chasing what didn't want me back." When he left, I stood at the doorway watching his car fade into the distance. There were no tears this time, just calm acceptance. That afternoon, I brewed tea and carried it to the garden. The roses swayed gently in the breeze, the same ones I'd planted the year he left. They'd survived drought, frost, and neglect, just like me. I sat on the wooden bench, sunlight warming my face. For the first time in years, I smiled without heaviness. Sometimes, peace doesn't arrive with applause. It comes quietly, like forgiveness whispered to yourself. I looked at my mansion, my proof that pain can bloom into purpose, and whispered, "You made it, Ruth. You finally made it." Because the truest victory isn't revenge. It's knowing you're still standing, graceful, unshaken, and free.